Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Rising Economy keynote presentation, Skills Revolution, Our Future Depends on It. I'm Kevin Hall. I'm the new President and Vice-Chancellor at the University of Victoria. We're joining you today virtually from our campus and wish to begin by acknowledging with respect the Lekwungen people on whose traditional territory UVic stands, and the Songhees and the Esquimalt and Wasanic people whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and commit to walk together on the path to truth, respect, and reconciliation. So today you're participating in just one of more than 30 sessions that make up the Rising Economy Week, an immersive week-long virtual event co-hosted by the South Island Prosperity Partnership and the Pacific Northwest Economic Region. Our university is honored today to be the sponsor of today's keynote session with John Stackhouse, and to be part of an event that aims to really move the needle on economic recovery and to create prosperity for our region in the future. Universities are critical to the health and prosperity of our region, and we can contribute in many ways, through research, innovation, and technology, through collaborations and community engagement, and by preparing a large part of the future workforce. And just by being good corporate citizens, committed to making social, environmental, and economic change. Our future is going to continue to be characterized by change, which is why at UVic we place such important emphasis on experiential and lifelong learning. It's the ability to learn and to keep learning that allows us to adapt to challenge and to be resilient in the face of challenges such as this pandemic. Being resilient allows us to take advantages of the opportunity that change throws our way. And on that note, it's my pleasure to introduce to you today the keynote speaker, John Stackhouse, Senior Vice President, Office of the CEO, RBC. John advises the executive leadership team and the board of directors on global economic, business, political, and social trends, and provides insights on how these are affecting RBC, its clients, and society at large. He's a much sought after speaker, moderator, and writer on national affairs with a focus on Canada's role in the world. He's a champion for an array of issues, including international competitiveness, education, digital innovation, immigration, and corporate governance. John offers a unique international perspective gained from over 30 years as an accomplished journalist, as the former editor-in-chief of the Globe and Mail, and as a best-selling author whose books include Timbit Nation and Mass Disruption, 30 years on the front lines of a media revolution. He's a senior fellow at the Howe Institute and the University of Toronto's Munk School of Global Affairs. His next book, Planet Canada, is due to be published this fall by Penguin Random House. Please join me in welcoming John Stackhouse.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Kevin, so much for that kind introduction. I only regret that I am not there with you in person. I'm sure we all want to be together, and it won't be too long for that to happen. It seems like a lifetime ago, but I was in Victoria only a little over a year ago, I think it was. Had a fantastic visit, got to meet lots of people in the community, had a great session with SIP, and got to spend some time on campus. So I'm really grateful for that time, and look forward to getting back with you. I'm going to go through a discussion today about the skills revolution, and I can't believe our timing. I should ask first, can you hear me okay? Because that's always the delicate question in these presentations, to make sure that you're not on mute. So it's all I think it's all good. This is incredible timing. When we agreed to this topic and to this day, who could have thought that today we'd have a second vaccine, not fully announced, but results out there that are really encouraging. Stock market is on fire. It just closed at a record high in the US, and there's an incredible confidence despite all the challenges. And I'm here in Ontario, where we're facing some serious challenges, but a lot of business confidence out there for 2021 if we can get through the next few months together. But what has me really excited today is a debate that is about to break into the open in the US, and I hope here in Canada, about the importance of skills to the recovery. Joe Biden's team is starting to socialize an idea that I have some concerns about. The idea is that people need jobs more than skills. We don't need to worry about skills, just get people back to work. The skills will take care of themselves. Of course, people need jobs for all sorts of reasons. But we have to pause for a moment, and that's what I'll try to walk through in my presentation today, and ask ourselves, are we going back or are we going forward coming out of this crisis? I'll just scroll back to the top here, bear with me. Here we are, skills for the post-pandemic economy. Are we going back or are we going forward? Are we going back to 2019 or are we going to go into 2021 into a very different decade from what we've known? I think we're going forward. The future has come for a visit. It has crashed through our front door. We have seen 10 years of change compressed into 10 months. We see that in our business, in banking. I get to talk to people across the economy in all sorts of sectors, as well as in government and in education and in the nonprofit world. And they see this compression of change and acceleration of change, which is, for the most part, very exciting. But the future is here. It's come, and it's not going to wait for us to kind of get out of bed and get dressed and go out the door with it. It's going to take off if we don't get it right. And to get it right, we're going to need collectively a different skill set than we did coming into this crisis. When we look at RBC, when we look at the crisis, we do see this K-shaped challenge, a K-shaped recovery starting to take form, where some sectors, some jobs are spiking back up as if they went down and went up, and then others are flatlined. Half the job losses out there are in accommodation and hospitality. A quarter of the job losses additionally are in non-essential retail. These are jobs that are not going to come back necessarily in big numbers anytime soon. And in some places, they're not going to come back at all. So we have to think about the skills that people who have been disrupted and displaced by this crisis will need to be fully and meaningfully engaged and employed in the 2020s. A lot of those people, far too many, are at the lower end of the income and education scale. When we look at the Canadian labor market, the K bends at the $800 a week line, which means if you're making more than $800 a week, you've probably got through this crisis okay so far. Lots of challenges, of course, but you've probably got through better than most. If you're making less than that, less than $40,000 a year, and there's too many people out there working hard and making less than $40,000 a year, you may be out of work and you're going to be challenged to get back into work, especially into a meaningful job. That's where skills is going to be so important. So let's talk about what kind of skills we're going to need collectively to really take advantage of a recovery and a rebuild that, as I say, we think is going to lead us into a new economy, a better economy, a more sustainable economy. But it's going to be an economy that requires different skills. We published a report a number of months ago looking at how COVID is transforming the economy and disrupting every business. Every business we get to work with has been disrupted by COVID. And we were able to group the disruptions into 8 categories, 8 ways that COVID is causing us to go about work differently, shopping differently, watching differently. And I want to share with you today a new analysis that we haven't shared publicly before that starts to look at how these disruptions are also changing the skills that we're going to need and that are going to be growing in demand. So I'll walk through these 8 changes, but with each one, I'll talk a bit about the skills that we see are going to be more in demand and we should pay more attention to. So the first disruption we all know very well, obviously, is how we work. 90% of our employees here at RBC, got 50,000, 55,000 employees in Canada. 90% of them went to a remote work environment within a matter of days, really, in March. Most of them, I'm in the office today, but pretty much I feel like I'm alone. It's like Home Alone, the Office edition. I'm here pretty much alone on most days. Most people continue to want to work at home. And as we talk to clients...
Sorry, John, it's Kieran here from the facilitators. We just don't have your screens share coming through. Do you want to just try that again? Sorry, just for the attendees to see.
How's that, Karen?
Perfect, we have it now. Thanks, John.
Okay. So I take it you didn't see the earlier slides.
Unfortunately not, but we can attach this to the session later for everyone to see. Thanks,
That's okay.
John.
So thank you. Sorry about that, folks. How we work has gone through a profound change, as I was saying, but you'll see here on the slide that roughly half of the work from home employees out there expect to maintain at least a hybrid model. They're going to want to continue to work remotely for all sorts of reasons, as well as have the option of some kind of shared environment. Half of the businesses out there roughly feel they don't have the technology or the skills to offer that and at least be efficient and competitive in offering it. So as we see these blended models start to get baked in, as we see the distribution of tools, hardware and software to people's home-based work environments, we're seeing a huge change in skills that are growing in demand. One of the most important ones is problem solving. It may seem intuitive, but any labor force economist knows and understands the complexity of problem solving. It's being able to identify complex problems and review related information to develop and evaluate options and implement solutions. Think of the problems we all had to wrestle with in March and April and how we had to find solutions. And you can probably all think of your own teams or businesses or organizations who you partner with, who figured out a way through things and created a better working model for their employees, for their businesses, and for their partners. That's the sort of skill we've got to become better at identifying, developing, promoting, and evaluating and rewarding. Our competitors are going to be doing that. They are going to be looking for problem solvers, people who can work with unforeseen problems of technology, health and wellness, business operations, and work with different tools. How many of us, I clearly just failed one of the Zoom tests, but how many of us even knew how to open Zoom in March? Just a small illustration of the sort of skills that problem solvers are able to bring. Second big trend we see out there is how we shop. Of course, we're all complicit in this. We're buying a lot more, having delivered a lot more, and expecting to buy whatever we want, whenever we want, wherever we want it shipped. That is now the baseline of commerce. It's e-commerce, but it is the baseline of commerce. But what we also saw over this summer, which was not really what we had expected, was the emergence of a hybrid model. And I'm going to keep coming back to that word hybrid because that informs the kind of skills that we're going to need, where more and more people wanted to buy online and pick up at a store, curbside services. Retailers want that as well for a host of reasons. But as you see, a 500% increase in buy online, pick up in store during the pandemic. So this new normal has been set in where we have a hybrid of buying and of selling. But as we go through this disruption, this shift in how we shop, the other interesting trend to pay attention to, so there's the hybrid model that's emerging. We also have to appreciate that loyalty is suddenly in play. It's a jump ball for consumer loyalty out there right now. A huge number of people in the US as well as Canada have been buying products and services from providers, from companies they had never dealt with before. They are testing new brands. And if you rely on your brand, if you rely on consumer and brand loyalty, understand that your consumers may not be as loyal as they used to be. And they're getting exposed to all sorts of alternatives. So game time for all of us. But the beauty of jump ball is you also have the opportunity to take the ball from someone else. You have the opportunity now to get into the path of someone else's consumers, someone else's clients, and pull them into whatever business you have, offer them whatever it is you create and you believe in. That's a fantastic opportunity as well as challenge, but it requires a different kind of skill. Of course, it requires sales skills, but we think this is going to lead to an increased demand for systems analysis skills, where people are there's going to be a greater demand for people who are able to work with data. They don't need to be data jockeys, but they need to be able to understand how data speaks to decisions, determining how a system should work and how it changes in conditions and operations, and the environment that will create for consumers. Think about all those BOPIS, the buy online, pick up in store, curbside models that I spoke to. The smart retailers are investing in systems analysis to understand how the consumer is changing when they pick up at a curbside, and trying to improve the service and improve the relevance of what they do. That kind of skill, whether it's in retail or healthcare or hospitality, is going to grow in demand in the years ahead. And in the years ahead, we're going to have far more technology, thanks to things like 5G, to be able to do near real-time systems analysis. And with all of this, understand that if you're not investing in these skills, your competitors are. And today, everyone is a competitor or a potential competitor. So be prepared to be challenged by systems analysts in other organizations if you don't have that skill yourself. Third big trend we're seeing out there is how we watch. Of course, we all understand the beauty of binging and the great amount of content that we have. And it's not just Netflix and Disney Plus. We are now able to get the world's best museums and art galleries and symphonies and musicians and street artists into our hands, into our phones, or into our living rooms, wherever we like to watch, in ways that we couldn't or didn't appreciate 12 months ago. It's not the same. It doesn't have nearly the same beauty and aesthetics necessarily that an in-person experience has, but it also gives us access. It democratizes access, especially globally. That's wonderful. But one of the interesting aspects of how we watch, that we're watching, is how we interact. And we're all in the content business. We all use content, whether it's presentations like this or social media, to engage with consumers, to speak to consumers, to develop relationships with consumers. But we know it's not a one-way street. People don't want to just sit back in their couch and watch and binge on our content. They want to interact with it. And so it shouldn't be surprising that we saw a hockey stick spike in gaming through this summer, as people wanted to interact with as gamers. But we also saw a hockey stick increase in social media interaction, especially with the more interactive channels and platforms like TikTok, which are doing fantastically well, because people want to interact and they want multimedia. They want to be able to shape the content themselves, not just watch and have it played to them. They want to play with it. They want to play with your content and play it back to you and play it back to their networks. And again, I mean, that's wonderful for us as consumers. But again, this changes the skills that we need if we are relying on content to develop our markets. And so we're all going to need people with more digital and multimedia skills. We're all going to need that. But that innate ability to imagine content, to shape content, to inform content, and demand content of our organizations that is interactive, that is dynamic, that is meaningful and relevant to the consumer who we want to connect with. A terrific skill that is already in hot demand that we can't underestimate. I'm personally fascinated with the demand for gaming skills, which mainstream organizations really haven't figured out at the pace that they need to. One of the examples I like to share in my presentations when we talk about content is how content is shifting to new platforms in this crisis. One of the best examples is Travis Scott, the rapper, who has become a sensation, a franchise on Fortnite. And he is now embedding his concerts into Fortnite video games and getting, I think one of his concerts this summer got 12 million viewers. He doesn't need to do arena tours if he doesn't want to, not when he can get 12 million viewers for a concert through Fortnite. AOC, the great Democrat congresswoman from New York, is now doing more of her rallies on Twitch, on the Amazon platform, because she can get something like 500,000 people engaged live, not watching it later, which millions do, but live, a multiple of what she would ever get in person. So think of the skills that we all need as organizations to imagine and then execute on those sorts of opportunities in ways that 10x the number of people we can reach with our content, but 10x the kind of engagement that we want with our consumers. And again, if we don't have teams of digital and multimedia people who are doing that, our competitors are going to be figuring out that for us. Which takes me to point number 4 of how we share. 2020, I mean, of course, it is going to be remembered as the year of a tragic global pandemic. It's also going to be remembered as a year of historic change in data and in the data revolution. The data revolution is not new. It's been around for decades, but it's been accelerating for the last decade. But this year, it has done things that we couldn't have imagined 12 months ago, including in the first quarter of this year, global internet traffic going up 40%. We are in the midst of a mind-boggling explosion of data. Everything we do and all our communications is creating data. And all of our decisions that we make as organizers, as managers, as leaders, or as creators can be better informed and shaped by data. If we invest not just in the technology and bandwidth, of course, and cloud, we've got to do a lot more investing there. But if we invest in the skills to understand data, because data, just numbers, it's numbers. It's useless if you don't have the skills to work with the tools and the technology to understand what it means to your business, to your organization, to your passion project, to help you grow what you're doing. That's going to need, of course, more data analysts. That's maybe a bit too obvious. It's also going to need what we call resource management skills, of being able to find the resources in an organization or in partner organizations to help you with that data analysis. One of the best examples I can share, I came across just a few days ago when I was doing a presentation with the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce. And through that presentation, got to know a young entrepreneur in Saskatoon who owns a coffee franchise, a coffee business there. And she, rather than shutting the doors and turning out the lights when they were forced to lock down, decided to transform her business. She saw her business not just as a coffee business, but as a data business, because she was able to use content, dynamic, interactive content about coffee. We all love coffee, to speak to her consumers and potential consumers, but to use data to learn from them, to learn what it is about coffee they like, when they like it, what kind of coffee they like, but critically, what sits on the path to their coffee drinking or coffee buying decision. And as she is understanding the data behind this, she is now able to turn to much larger organizations like Sobeys and insert themselves into their businesses with this knowledge and 10x her business. But she had to be one of those resource mobilizers who was able to find the resources in other organizations as well as in her own small business to put together a data strategy, a dynamic data strategy that allows her to think through this crisis. The next big trend that we're seeing out there is how we travel. We all know this one very, very well. And this is going to be with us for a while. Even with these vaccines, we're not going to see international travel at the numbers we saw 12 months ago, not anytime soon. This can be a wonderful opportunity for all of our communities, for all of us as people to get to know our local communities better, to travel more locally, to staycation and develop our own experiences, to be more creative. But this has really flipped the travel model on its head and forced a lot of operators to think about the skills they need to create travel experiences or recreation experiences in the local community that engages people in a different way. So there may be more jobs coming back with travel, but there'll be different jobs. And there's going to be a growing demand for creativity in the travel and tourism and experience economy sector. This is a wonderful opportunity. But how do we help travel operators, tour operators, accommodation and hospitality providers think about the creativity and creative skills they're going to need to create both the physical but also virtual experiences that are going to be the engines. Remember, it's going to be a hybrid. It's not either all digital or all physical. It's a hybrid. So you're going to need those virtual experiences as well as real in-person physical experiences, and be really creative about it to engage people who maybe want to go off to a beach this winter but are going to have to stay in the neighborhood. but you, with the right creative skills, as the people behind this image, can create something that people will be willing to invest their time and money in. How we heal is going through maybe the most important revolution of all, because this is critical to the ending of this pandemic. This pandemic has shown us how dependent we are on great healthcare, and we're lucky, especially in this country, to have really great healthcare. But it's also shown us the weaknesses, the Achilles heels, if you will, in our healthcare system, including in prevention, in diagnostics, in home care, in elder care. I could go on and on. You're probably all familiar with this, sadly so. But how do we ensure that as we rebuild, we don't just put people back into healthcare jobs as they might have been before, but we think about the healthcare jobs of the future in telehealth, in health tech, in diagnostics, that will help people age and live better, not just live longer, but live better as they age and age in place. There's all sorts of technologies just emerging that we'll be able to take advantage of, but we're going to need, again, different skills to do this. And one of the most important that we see, and we're stressing this to healthcare providers, we published a report a little over a year ago called Paging Doctor Data, which talked about the skills needs in healthcare that we saw at the time. And you can infer from the title, Paging Doctor Data, that digital and data were key. But communication was a critical part, a really important part of the health package for the 2020s. And as we think about remote healthcare, about telehealth, about health at home, how do we think about the communication skills, soft and hard, that healthcare providers are going to need to do their jobs more efficiently, more effectively, and more safely in the sort of environment that we're in today? We've got the same challenge with how we learn. The education system has been put on notice this year in this pandemic, on notice to create a new generation of education that is both in place and online. It's not mutually exclusive. In fact, they're interactive, literally. We need classrooms, we need campuses. Students want to be on campus, they want to be in class, but not all the time. They want not just the convenience of online learning, but the smart educators who we come across around the world are also seeing the power of digital education, not just online, digital, that allows them to harness the data to create education in a personalized way, which transforms education so that it is at the speed of the learner, not at the speed of the educator. We're seeing that across the economy. The economy, but society of the future is going to be at the speed of the consumer, of the end user, not at the speed of the producer. Producers who figure this out are going to take off. They're going to have huge opportunities, but they're going to need different skills. And in education, this is going to put an even greater premium on collaboration. We all know that the sage on the stage is long gone. That's a kind of an interesting myth from yesteryear. I don't see a lot of it today, but we're really going to need to help educators move well beyond that. It's not them lecturing literally to students, whether it's in a classroom or online. It is them collaborating, not just with students, but with people in the community, with employers, with other educators in ways that are interactive. Think back to content that allow the students to help shape the education experience rather than to be just passive consumers. And then lastly, how we trade is going through another revolution of its own this year. The Biden administration is not going to change this. Protectionist forces, and I'm not being alarmist here, I don't think walls are going to go up, but trade is going to be a little tougher in the years ahead. We are seeing more techno-nationalism. We are seeing more regionalism, like we saw this weekend with the Asia Free Trade Agreement. And for Canada, we're well positioned with our trade agreements with both the United States, Europe, and Asia. But we're going to have to be more strategic and a little savvier than we've been in the past to cut through some of these challenges. And that's going to need different skills, which actually Canadians are pretty good at, but we got to get much better at. Social perceptiveness is going to be a defining skill for organizations that want to export their goods and services to the world. And if any of you do not see yourself as an exporter, I suggest you think about that, because we all have to be exporters, especially in a digital platform-based economy, because it's too easy for others to come into our markets, even in the dead of night, through the platforms. So we've got to get out there as well. But to do that, you don't need just the tech skills that I talked about. You need people with social perceptiveness who understand how people, fortunately, I'm grateful for this, people in different parts of the world behave, think, act differently. And we need to think about how to work with those cultural and social differences for our advantage, but a mutual advantage that benefits others as well. So as we wrap up, and hopefully we've got some time for a bit of conversation here, I want to leave you with some of our takeaways about how COVID is transforming our economy and our society, and what this can mean to the skills that we need. First point is we are living in a distributed economy and distributed society. The 20th century was all about centralization: office towers, campuses, factories, hospitals, shopping malls. Those were all centralization plays. We've seen in this crisis a decentralization play, and a lot of people and organizations figuring out this ain't so bad. In fact, this may be better. So as we adjust to a more distributed economy, how do you think about the skills that you need and want in that distributed environment? People who can work more independently, but who can collaborate, who can communicate, who can access data, even if they're not data junkies or data jockeys, and work not just with their coworkers, but with clients, with customers, with consumers in a much more interactive world. Secondly, hybrid. How do we develop skills for all of our organizations to create more hybrid models where there's both physical and digital channels? How do we come to grips with all the habits that are being hardwired out there? When you think back to March and April and all the things that seemed weird, conversations like this that seem normal today, this is the new normal. This is the new normal. What kind of skills do you need today? What sort of skills are you using today that you didn't use 10, 12 months ago? You're going to need more of those skills next year and the year beyond. Data, I can't stress enough, and perpetual data. Data is not about a spreadsheet. It's not about a report that someone gives you periodically. It is something that is always on, always active, always changing, and always informing. And if you are not allowing data to inform you and your teams, rest assured others, including those big platform companies, have access to the same data or similar data sets. They will be in that perpetual data swirl, learning and developing better products and services. How do we take advantage? And I don't say this lightly because I know how challenging it is out there right now, but how do we look into 2021 and the new wealth that there will be because of higher real estate values, higher stock market values, to ensure that that wealth is invested productively and sustainably in the economy of tomorrow? How do we take advantage of the new loyalty that's taking place around the world? How do we turn that to our individual organization's advantage, but to our collective advantage? There's a real good challenge there. And how do we work with new consumers? How do we think beyond the market that we assumed was ours 12 months ago to be able to reach new consumers with new engagement? Because the economy of tomorrow, in fact, the economy of today, is defined by engagement. It's shaped by relevance. What is your relevance to the consumer out there? How are you meaningful to their lives? How do you speak to that? How do you engage consumers? If you believe in what you create and what you sell and what you produce, this is a beautiful opportunity because you probably want to get it to more people and have more people engage with it. If you want to follow more of what we do at RBC, share a few links with you. Please visit us at rbc.com/thoughtleadership. You can follow me on LinkedIn or on Twitter at Stackhouse John. You can get those two reports that I cited at the 8 Trends one at rbc.com/8trends and rbc.com/small business pivot. And then lastly, if you're a podcast listener and who is not a podcast listener, you can hear a lot of these conversations on our bi-weekly podcast, RBC Disruptors, which you can get through Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Just look for Disruptors and RBC, or come to us at rbc.com/disruptors We've got a new episode out on 5G and how it is creating all sorts of tremendous opportunities for businesses as well as nonprofits and communities if we get it right. So Kieran, thank you for the opportunity to speak with this group, and I'd love to spend a bit of time talking, trying to answer any of the questions that are out there or engaging in conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, John. That was a wonderful keynote and such a defining conversation of looking at sort of the future of our economy right now. So couldn't have picked a better topic for Rising Economy Week. And now, so first of all, actually, we're going to invite attendees to submit their questions into the Zoom Q&A. And the session is being recorded, so you can submit your questions anonymously if you prefer. And if possible, please use the Zoom Q&A chat. So the production team will be monitoring the Whova chat and Q&A for those joining us through the app. And of course, remember that you can share your takeaways on social media, and please use the hashtag Rising Economy Week 2020. So just to get us going, John, I have a question for you actually. We hear so much about the war on talent, and particularly in North America and developing world countries, being such a huge thing for companies to grapple with. And I'm wondering how you see the pandemic having changed some of this war on talent, and what sort of, are you seeing any differences in terms of skills or opportunities for sort of remote war on talent? And what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was just scrolling through the questions in the chat as well. There's a lot of awesome ones there, so I hope we have time to get to a good number of them. So we're seeing huge demand for a lot of the classic tech skills. That's only going to increase. Huge demand for trade skills as well, though, which we shouldn't underestimate, as people spend a lot more on renos and other projects because we're all spending more time at home. And we can't forget about the demographic pressures that we were talking about a year ago. Those are more acute today because we have less immigration and we're continuing to age as a society. So we've got all these forces at play. One of the things I think is going to be most interesting about the war on talent as we come out of this crisis, and there is going to be a demand, especially for these special skills, is the question of whether geography matters anymore. If you are able to work remotely or run this sort of conversation remotely, if I can work from home, I can work from anywhere. And if that's the case, then at least theoretically, I can probably work for anyone, anywhere. So does that create open bidding on talent and more of a global war for talent in a way that we haven't seen before? I think there's all sorts of labor laws and tax laws that are going to make that not revolutionary, but I think on the margins there could be some interesting pressures there. But there will be a more acute demand for the skills I spoke about, as well as those classic tech skills. And what's different going into 2021, and it will remain, is that organizations that can offer a well-resourced hybrid model are going to be way ahead. So organizations that are saying everyone has to work from home all the time are going to be challenged. You are going to need to be able to say to that talented person you're going after, we're going to give you a space to work when you want to come into a space to work, and we're going to give you the tools and flexibility to work at home or wherever you want, whenever you want. The balance in the bargain between employer and employee is going to, at the high end of the talent scale, is going to be in the employee's favor.
That's great, thank you. And now for some questions from the audience. John, I'm going to combine two questions actually from Natasha Apollonova from Toronto. Hi Natasha. And Frank Beret from Victoria. So they both have questions about what sort of learning and opportunities are available for mid-career professionals, and then on the conversely low-skilled workforce. So how do you sort of balance out those two or differentiate advice for those two categories?
No, thanks for the question. Data. If you have data, and it doesn't mean mean you need to be a data scientist, but having an appreciation of data, and Natasha, I know you do, but advancing that is certainly an advantage in any sector, in any profession.
Okay, great. And in terms of specific examples, Frank's interested in any case stories of that you think would be helpful, particularly in the low skilled workers category.
Yeah, well, this is where I think the Biden plan may be a little off, because the unemployment is most acute in restaurants and retail, hospitality, in jobs that depend on people getting together in big numbers, on that centralization model. That's not going to come back even with the vaccine immediately. And so the employment is not going to come back immediately. And we're going to have a demand in more distributed parts of the economy. So that's good for tech workers, but we'll also see it in manufacturing, for instance. We'll see it in agriculture and food production. And it's very hard to move people from to those jobs. We saw this in the spring when there was a shortage of farm workers. And no one could get Canadians to, even though there was mass unemployment, to shift to farm jobs. They probably didn't have the skills to do it, or even the desire to do it, but definitely not the skills to do it in the same season. So this is a really interesting challenge, because we can't, I think of Aaron O'Toole's line that we can't be a nation of Uber drivers. Not that there's nothing wrong with being an Uber driver, but we have to think more ambitiously than that. How do we help the unemployed restaurant worker do more than become a DoorDash bicycle courier? That's probably not a smart skills strategy. And I think if I can jump ahead to some of the other questions, there's a real moment here, an opportunity for smart, but you've got to move quickly, education institutions to really get into the micro-credential business, to offer single courses or micro-credentials that help people in an intensive way in a few months or maybe a few weeks develop the skills, not to become a software coder per se, but to be more than a food delivery person, because the demand for those other jobs, which can be done remotely, is going to be there. We're going to see a tremendous demand in healthcare for not just frontline workers, but for health systems workers, including data analysts, as we spend more on healthcare in the years ahead. We need all sorts of new skills in long-term care, and they're not just changing. They're not just attendant jobs. That industry needs to become much more sophisticated. That's been a clear signal message from this crisis. How do we get the skills into a sector like that to help it become much more sophisticated?
That's great. Thank you. And I've got a question here from Jane McIver. Have there been any studies indicating that there's been a loss or an increase in productivity because of remote workplaces? Have you seen sectors that have done better than others?
There was an interesting OECD study out a couple of months ago that said there was essentially a sweet spot of productivity on remote work, and we had gone past it. So you get more and more productivity and then less and less productivity. So, and it changes by sector, probably by organization. But if you are a manager or thinking about this, how do you think about what that sweet spot is, where you don't want people working remotely, with exceptions, all the time? That is not going to reach optimal efficiency, concerning for other reasons as well. Nor do you want people in the office or wherever it is all the time for optimal efficiency. So interesting challenge there, but it was an OECD study.
Great. And from Vern Raincock, he has a good question, a series of questions really related to how online education is still seems to be difficult and very expensive. And are we going to see some changes in that area when the sort of university model is a more restrictive model, and how do we maybe open that up? Particularly when, as he says, over 35% of those aged over 50 are underemployed.
Yeah, I don't know if Kevin or others from the sector want to speak to this, because it's a general question with lots of specific exceptions, depending on who's studying what, where, when. But we probably will see a more flexible pricing model, if I can put it that way, in education in the years ahead, especially for single courses for those micro-credentials, because a lot of private suppliers, frankly, are going to get into that field. You see Google doing this. And there's nothing inherently bad about that. If you know who is the best organization to retrain unemployed restaurant workers, let's put that out for tender and figure out what the best pricing is, both if there's a public subsidy to it, but also for the student, for the consumer of that. That can be a good thing. I think this crisis has also helped, if I could just add a thought to that, has helped educators realize, and I think they have to become much better at pricing this, the intangible value of an on-campus education. So we tend to dismiss that as kind of the social side of education, and it's like, whatever, yeah, that's kind of a bonus. Universities and colleges need to stop thinking about that as a bonus. You need to think about that as a core part of your product, if I can be sort of a business head about a mind about this, and attribute value to that, because that is why students want to come back to campus, because of that. So value it, build it into the price. So when people say, hey, why are you charging me so much? You can say, well, that so-called campus experience is worth that much. That campus experience also exists in a digital environment. Universities and colleges are getting better at that, not nearly as good as they need to be. But when you can create a virtual environment that is as valuable, I don't want to use Fortnite as an example, but as sophisticated and valuable and as engaging as a lot of other virtual models that we see out there, then that will be part of your value proposition with the core bit of learning that you're sharing with the student.
Thank you. That's very interesting. We're certainly seeing a lot of different models emerging right now. And so do you have any perspective? This is a question in from Bruce Williams from Greater Victoria's Chamber of Commerce. And do you have any perspective on our unique circumstance as being located on an island? Technology doesn't need to take a ferry, but supplies do.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We're going to, if I understand it correctly, I'll answer it this way. We're going to see a reorientation of supply chains, and you think back to my 8th trend on how we trade. This can be good for local providers to have more local consumers, but it comes at a cost of lack of scale, and that tends to lead to higher prices. This is going to be a challenge, and it's really important for Canada that we don't get shut out of the U.S. supply chain system, because we need that scale of U.S. suppliers, but also of U.S. consumers. For an educator, though, I think whether you're on an island or in a city, you might want to think about the opportunity that this crisis has presented in terms of changing your addressable market. And too many Canadian educators think of their addressable market with a certain radius from their school. And surely out of this crisis, we've realized if you're an educator, you can educate anyone anywhere quite easily now. And there's a growing social acceptance of this. We put out a paper in an RBC thought leadership paper in September on the internationalization of education, and suggested a concept called Canada U, suggesting let's build a platform in this country that puts on that platform the best courses and education that Canadian schools create, and offer that to the world, and let people study in Canada without coming to Canada, at least for a bit, for a couple of credits or a year or two, and then move here, but consider it like an on-ramp to Canada. And as a result, we don't need to think about attracting 500,000 international students. That's fine to keep doing that. But we need to think about getting our education to 5 million, or maybe it's 50 million people around the world. It's that 10x mentality that allows us to do all sorts of other things. It's not just for the sake of scale. That scale allows you to do lots of other things. And please keep in mind, if you're not doing it, others are.
Okay, great points. From Lisa Helps here, a good question, tricky question maybe. What are the top 3 actions we should take to bring the bottom line of the K in the sort of famous now K-shaped recovery closer to the top line?
Yeah, well, it's it's not easy, but certainly reskilling is critical. Micro-credentials is part of that. We have to think about mobility. And this is going to be one of the challenges of the recovery. It tends to be a challenge of recovery. The new jobs are often not where the old jobs were. So how do we get people from downtown restaurants to suburban warehouses? Is one of the challenges that we see today. There's plenty of jobs, not plenty, but a number of them in suburban warehouses, the Amazon economy. So that ability to get people to different places is going to be key. Helping people, creating so reskilling, geographic mobility, and then thirdly, I would say social infrastructure, because people need. We talk a lot in this country about childcare and daycare is critical, but they also need bandwidth to be able to work from home, and in many places they need community centers as a place to work. Often people in the lower part of that K are in a living environment where they can't work from home, even if they have their own computer and Wi-Fi, which they often don't. There's other people in the home that doesn't allow for that. So how do we think about community facilities, turning libraries or recreation centers into places where people can work and have the digital tools and collaboration opportunities so that they can become more dynamic players in that new platform economy?
Okay, so this is actually a little bit of a departure from this question, but from Richard Michaels. John, my question is, what is your concern regarding social media platforms such as the hugely popular TikTok in regards to how we share information and how we shop with China? And are there issues with privacy concerns? And what is your advice there?
Wow, that's probably worth a whole separate discussion. Yeah, there's a lot of good concerns in that question, and we need to be vigilant with that. At the same time, and I could go on about that, but I'm mindful of the other questions. I think we also need to be not dismissive of the innovation opportunities that we have as a country, and we're pretty good at privacy in this country. We need to continue to develop it, but we're pretty good because we tend to take a balanced approach between protection of the individual and the opportunity for entrepreneurs, for businesses, for organizations to create. And I would hope that as we come out of this crisis, we don't swing one way or the other too far, because if we, trying to address the privacy concerns that you raise, swing too far one way, all those opportunities that I spoke about around data, for us to innovate with data, are going to go to someone else or to go somewhere else. So let's be, let's be in that good Canadian way, mindful of the need to stick to the middle ground.
Great. There were so many good questions here, and I'm afraid we're not going to have enough time to go through all of them. But I'm going to have one final question here, a big picture question from Basma from UVic here, and she's wondering to what extent these skills are also useful for tackling big challenges such as climate change that require long-term thinking to prepare for future high-impact events. And do we need other skills?
What a wonderful, wonderful question. We need to, that is an outstanding question that should really inspire us going forward. And as hard as this year has been, and we're not out of it by any stretch, but you knock on wood, when we come out of this, how do we say, look back and not lose sight of what got us through this crisis, of our ability to collaborate, of our ability to take on massive challenges. All of our organizations did that. As I mentioned, we at RBC, 50,000 people managed to go work remotely without any real plan for it. I think that's awesome. And I've seen countless organizations do that. But across society, how did we manage to keep, as hard as it's been, the healthcare system going? How have we managed to keep education and schools going with all the challenges that they face, on and on? What are the skills that enable that? And then how do we apply those skills to those long-term challenges, climate change, economic inequality, racial injustice, on and on. We should learn or not lose sight of the power of the hackathon model of that was so strong through the latter part of the 2010s. How do we maybe take some of those skills and create national hackathons in 2021 that allow us to take on these challenges? But many of the skills that I talked about are exactly the skills that we need. It is those digital and data-minded skills that are going to help us solve those challenges. But it's the soft skills as well. We published a really great report at RBC 2 years ago called Humans Wanted, that looked at the skills that are going to be needed for the next generation of our economy. And if you want to get a copy, just Google RBC and Humans Wanted. And we called it Humans Wanted because, and we did a year-long data analytics project to study a couple of million jobs across 300 occupations. And we found that the skills that were growing in demand were all the so-called soft skills: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, complex problem solving. And we realized these are not soft skills. They're hard. They're really hard. But they're human skills. These are the skills that differentiate us from the machines. And as we move deeper into a machine era, where machines, and that includes the algorithms that are allowing this sort of conversation, do more and more in our lives, and most of that is for the better. How do we double down on our human skills of collaboration, communication, complex problem solving, critical thinking, social perceptiveness, that have seen us through this crisis in so many ways, but can be applied to those seemingly insurmountable challenges, those daunting challenges that are too often thought about as engineering challenges or economic challenges, where it's just the pricing model will change. Some of that, yes. Technology, yes. But human, absolutely. So let's make sure the human skills are better trained, better developed, better valued in the 2020s to get us way beyond in a better way than where we are today.
Well, I think that was the perfect question and answer to wrap up this session. And we've seen, past pandemics in the past are the causes of creating this greater gap, of achievement and equity and so on, and the issues for various groups of people. And so, I think that the single most important thing we can do is be investing in skills and our people and education. So thank you, John, for those tremendous insights, and for the audience, of course, wonderful and challenging and varied questions. So thank you all for your participation.